Today we have Mason Zeagler, who's with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. He's public policy officer at the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, where he leads federal lobbying efforts on behalf of access to care policy priorities and the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. He is pursuing a master's of public health degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Public Health degree in 2019. Mason has a personal connection to Parkinson's disease and a passion for helping members of our community engage in public policy and policy advocacy. And he is going to talk today about the plan to end Parkinson's disease. Thank you for joining us today, Mason.
Thank you, Eden, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my presentation. I'm going to play from beginning. Awesome. Someone give me a thumbs up. Beautiful. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Hello, and thank you so much for joining me to talk about the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, but also advocacy broadly. In case you have not heard, I want everyone to know that the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, that legislation was reintroduced late last week on Thursday. This is really exciting news, but it's only the beginning of our work to get the bill passed and signed into law. And we're going to talk more about that later in this presentation. But before we jump in, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself, and thank you, Eden, for that great intro. So, hi, my name is Mason Zeagler, and I am one of Michael J. Fox Foundation's federal lobbyists. And this means I meet with advocates and their federal policymakers, their representatives and senators in Congress to discuss issues important to the Parkinson's community. In my role, I lobby on behalf of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, as well as other topics, and I have a particular interest and focus in issues that impact how people living with Parkinson's disease access the care they need to diagnose, to treat, and manage their disease. On this slide, you can see my work email, and I encourage you to reach out if you have questions or information you'd like to share, and these slides will be shared with the group afterwards. So if you don't catch everything today, no worries, you're gonna get a copy afterwards. As Eden said, I'm originally from Eastern North Carolina, and I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2019. So I'm a Tar Heel. Actually, I'm a double Tar Heel, if you will, because I'm pursuing my Master's of Public Health degree from UNC remotely. So I work full-time and I'm a part-time master's student. I've been lobbying since I graduated. I formerly lobbied with the National Rural Health Association, so a bipartisan organization focused on rural health issues, rural health care providers. And now I work for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. And as a rural North Carolinian with a personal connection to Parkinson's disease, I've had the privilege of using my education to advance policy priorities on behalf of people who are important to me. So I think that's really special. So here's a quick outline of my presentation. We're going to kick off with a quick introduction and refresher on what advocacy is and what it isn't, and then do a deep dive into the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. And finally, we're going to wrap up with how you can get involved, which will include a short but comprehensive demonstration of the tools that the Michael J. Fox Foundation has pulled together for advocates. Okay, so we're going to kick it off with this Advocacy 101. Oh, I also want to note that we will also have time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please do jot those down as we're going through and then ask them at the end. Okay, so for the Advocacy 101, so alongside a nation network of advocates, the Michael J. Fox Foundation works to ensure that federal and state government policies are supportive of people living with Parkinson's disease, as well as their loved ones, and that there is a dedicated research toward a cure. As members of the Parkinson's community, you advocate on behalf of yourself or your loved ones all the time. You advocate with your doctors, whether it's them understanding your symptoms or your treatment regimen and how it fits into your life. You advocate with your loved ones and you try to do this so they understand what your symptoms are and let them know how they impact your life. And policy advocacy is actually very similar to this. It's simply public support for or recommendation of a specific cause or policy. And here you can see an example of that with Support the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. That's a form of advocacy, voicing a position on behalf of this bill. So before I go too much further, I do want to acknowledge that the Michael J. Fox Foundation does have a Parkinson's advocacy toolkit. And when you receive the slides, all of these are linked. And so if you're looking for this resource, all you have to do is just click on this button. But I'm going to be covering some of the information that's included in these advocacy resources. So there's several ways that you can take action or advocate on behalf of the national plan and other priorities that are personally important to yourself. For example, you can write your members of Congress by sending a letter or an email. You can also call the offices of your member of Congress to voice your support for or opposition against a specific bill or issue. And you can meet with members of Congress and their staff, whether it's virtually or in person, to share your position and request their support. This does not have to be a dedicated meeting that you set up yourself or schedule for yourself. For example, the Michael J. Fox Foundation helps set up meetings and schedule meetings between congressional offices and advocates. But there's also events that members of Congress host regularly called town halls. And they also are often at community events, especially when there's a large group there. So these are all opportunities to partake in advocacy. So I want to note that research indicates that the more personal the form of advocacy, the more likely it is that your request is going to be heard. So what does this mean? Well, although every form of advocacy is important and valuable and part of your toolbox, there are forms of advocacy that data indicates are more impactful than others. So writing an email or a letter is a helpful way to let staffers take note of an issue, especially when there's a high volume of these emails or letters coming into their inboxes, especially on a specific bill. But making a phone call can be even more powerful. Staffers who pick up the phone when you take the initiative and make a call, they actually make a tally of the issues that they receive calls about, whether it's in support of or opposition, and these are then shared with their bosses. So that's also a very important way of advocating. And then finally, even more impactful is actually meeting with the staff themselves, whether it's virtually or in person, to talk them through a specific issue. And we support advocates taking action all the ways that they feel comfortable, but we also want to encourage you to consider how you can reach outside of your comfort zone towards those forms of advocacy that are a little bit more uncomfortable. If you know you can click a button and send an email, maybe then you consider, okay, what will it take for me to be confident enough to speak on this issue via phone call, or maybe it's scheduling a meeting with your member of Congress. So in summary, each of these tactics are important tools that you can use to help your members of Congress understand what is important to their constituents and why. So for a second, I want to stress how important your why is in your letters, especially when you're sending them to members of Congress. So as a member of the Parkinson's community, you're an expert on how this disease impacts the lives of constituents in your members of Congress's district or state. You can speak directly to the challenges of accessing care, from getting an accurate diagnosis to obtaining and sustaining the treatment regimen that helps you or your loved ones manage the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And you can speak to how it's impacted your life, whether it's your finances, your job, what it means for your future. We understand that explaining these challenges can sometimes be difficult, and in a way it's emotional labor, but it really goes a long way in helping staffers empathize, staffers and their bosses empathize and understand the issues that are important to you and other members of the community. I also will note that when you advocate, you not only have to focus on the challenges that you've overcome, you can also talk about the ways that you are finding community and the ways that you are still living well with Parkinson's disease. So whether it's finding community through a boxing course or a support group, obviously, or a community walk event, it's important to explain how our community is still resilient, organized, and powerful too. Sharing your story goes a really long way in helping members of Congress understand what it's like living with Parkinson's disease or loving with someone with Parkinson's. And this is why that's so important. It helps them understand why it's important to support bills such as the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. While getting your whole story about Parkinson's disease into a few paragraphs is pretty much impossible, focusing on one or two key components is a great way to share insights into certain aspects of your life and to humanize the experience of living with Parkinson's disease. So you are their constituents, and when we say constituents, we also mean voters, and you can provide details about how Parkinson's has impacted your work, your day-to-day tasks, your finances, your home life, but your personal story goes a long way, and staffers take notes and share them with their bosses. It's often helpful to write notes about what you want to say before you tell your story, and being able to share your why, your reason for advocating with staffers and their members of Congress is an impactful and concise way to share that information. It's important and helpful to them. It does not need to be perfect by any means. It just needs to be true to you and your experiences. For a quick second, I want to talk about what advocacy is not, now that we've talked a little bit more about what advocacy is. So advocacy is not about simply making a demand of a staffer or your member of Congress one time. It's about making a request and providing context about how it impacts their constituents. Advocacy is not about being rude. Actually, a large part of advocacy is relationship building, showing staffers that you are seeking to help them to come around to the right decision, and building trust with their office is really important. This kind of work can be disrupted when advocates are rude or demanding in meetings or phone calls. Advocacy is not a single one-off action. It can be, but we know that's not how you want to be effective. Advocacy requires persistence as well as patience. And it's rare that the first time you meet with an office that they automatically take your request to their boss and do exactly what you would like them to, although that would be great. A large part of the first meeting will actually be bringing them up to speed on what's important about the issue, why it's important to you personally and to other constituents, and then how they can be helpful. They may need more time to take that information and run it up the chain of command, or reminders about what the request was and how they can be helpful to move the ball forward. Something I try to warn advocates about is how they are likely to meet, who they're likely to meet with. Many of the staffers you will encounter will look something like myself, a 20-year-old something, eager to help and ready to hear you out. Their bosses, they're trying to do right by their bosses and learn about the issues important to their constituents, but they also likely have 15 to 20 other meetings in any given day, and they're likely not experts on Parkinson's disease. So it's important to keep this in mind when you meet with them. Once they are educated and they do get it per se, they can be your biggest allies on the inside. So definitely take the time to help them empathize with your experiences, share the facts about the issue you care about, and help them help you by getting their boss to take a stance on an issue. So a couple tips and tricks about advocacy. So before the meeting, prepare. The most impactful advocate is an educated advocate. You do not need to know every single detail about the legislation you're talking about or the issue, but it is helpful if you can tie your personal story to some aspect of the bill that you're talking about. Know the name of the person that you're meeting with and the request that you're making and what specifically about their office will be important. So for example, committees of jurisdiction within Congress are important. We'll talk about those in just a second. You're welcome to bring your notes to the meeting or event and reference them as you speak with people. And during the meeting, definitely be polite and remind them that you want to be a resource to their office, an ongoing resource, so they can always reach out to you. Do not treat the meeting like a one-off. Remember, advocacy is about relationship building, not simply making a demand. And it can take a while to get an office from a maybe to a yes, but it's definitely worth the effort. Try as best you can to stay focused and on topics during meetings. Too often meetings become diluted or they diverge because someone wants to take down, wants the staffer to take down their personal stance on a personal tangent. As best as you can, keep the attention of the member and the staffer you're meeting with focused on your request for that specific meeting. If you don't know the answer to a question, don't answer it. Let them know that you'll follow up with them. We fall into this habit of having to come up with answers for staffers all the time, but it's perfectly okay to say, you know what, I'll get back to you with the information to make sure I'm speaking from, what's actually factual. So definitely do not answer questions you don't know the answer to. And then finally, follow up, whether it's sharing those answers to the questions you happen to not have the answer to, or sharing a written version of your personal story. Follow-up is really important. I will note that sometimes offices will keep a record of stories that they receive from constituents. They can share these with the member of Congress themselves for real-life examples of how an issue impacts their constituency. Definitely in your follow-up, reiterate the request you made during the meeting, and ask them when would be an appropriate time to check in on the status of your request. This then, provides the impetus for then following up with them and checking in and seeing, okay, so what has happened since the last time we spoke. And then finally, throughout this entire process, please do say thank you. It's important to be polite and understanding and gracious with staffers and their bosses, knowing they have a ton on their plate. And we want them to know that we are their allies on these issues and easy to work with. So that's a little bit on the Advocacy 101. I'm going to jump into now the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, which is something we are really excited about because it is first ever legislation solely devoted to ending Parkinson's disease. It's focused on a number of things. We'll talk about that on the next slide. But some of the overarching goals of the bill is that when it's passed, we want to unite the federal government in a mission to prevent and end Parkinson's. They do Parkinson's research in sort of silos at the federal level as it currently exists. And we want to focus national effort on how we can actually prevent and cure Parkinson's disease, but also improve access to care for people living with Parkinson's. This will help alleviate the financial and health burdens on American families, but also ensure that people with Parkinson's living today have access to the care that they need. In short, this legislation seeks to create an advisory council composed of representatives from federal agencies already working on Parkinson's disease, as well as people living with Parkinson's. We need these people at the table with this council, people living with Parkinson's, as well as their caregivers, their healthcare providers, and representatives from nonprofit organizations that have experience in Parkinson's research and care. This advisory council will create a strategic plan to end Parkinson's and will be responsible for reporting to Congress every 2 years on its progress and impact. And they'll do this through hosting open meetings and by doing a deep analysis of what's actually happening at the federal level and evaluating the current programs dedicated to Parkinson's. So here you can see the 3 pillars of what we consider within the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. It's funding research towards a cure. It's improving access to care for people living with Parkinson's disease. And it's also identifying mechanisms for prevention. And we see this as sort of a 3-part plan. The National Plan to End Parkinson's Act will actually be led by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary, or HHS Secretary. It will be a collaborative advisory council that creates and maintains an integrated national plan to prevent and cure Parkinson's disease. So we're going to get a little bit more into the national plan in just a second, but I want to talk to you about where it is within Congress right now. As you heard me mention, it was recently introduced just as of last week. Last Thursday, actually March 30th. And I will note that these are actually identical bills. And this is important when we talk about the legislative process. So in the House of Representatives, you can see is HR 2365, and it's being led by Representatives Gus Bilirakis and Paul Tonko. There are currently 10 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. And I put a note here that there are actually 435 members of the House. And then you can see that it's actually the Committee of Energy and Commerce. So when bills are referred in Congress, they're actually, or introduced in Congress, they're referred to committees of jurisdiction. And there's a whole slew of them in both the House and the Senate, and they focus on really specific issues. So it's important to know that the specific committee that this bill has been referred to is Energy and Commerce. And in the Senate, it's the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, or the HELP Committee. And in the Senate bill, it's S1064, and it's being led by Senators Capito and Murphy, and it currently has 8 of the 100 co-sponsors it could potentially have in the Senate. So when we talk about the legislative process, I think this diagram helps sum up most of it. So this link that's on this slide is a link to a video by the Library of Congress that helps explain this information. Another resource that we'll end up sharing with you all is from the National Association of Educating Young Children. And it does a really good job of explaining as simple as possible how a bill becomes a law. It's like Schoolhouse Rock, but a little bit more in depth. My way of thinking is that if you can explain it to a child, you can explain it to pretty much anyone. So I tend to use those resources that make it as simple as possible. So where we are right now are these orange boxes that you see on the screen. It's been introduced in both the House and the Senate. Next up is committee action or inaction on the bill. And we know which committees we're talking about: Energy and Commerce, and Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. So ENC and HELP in the House and the Senate. So after they go through the committee process, They either mark up the bill and make slight edits to it, or they vote and report the bill out to the full floor. And then there's floor committee hearings, or they actually would just host a vote on behalf of the bill. And then it goes to the opposite chamber and has to work through the same process. What's beautiful about the national plan is that we actually have it introduced in both the House and the Senate. So it's working through these processes synchronously. After it has gotten through both the House and the Senate, what happens is called a conference, or resolving differences between the two bills. Important to note, as of right now, the bills are identical. They may be edited or changed slightly through the committee process, and this conference allows for them to resolve the differences between the two different texts of the bill. After the conference is ended, it actually goes to the president to be signed or vetoed, hopefully signed, and then passed into law. And then there's actually regulatory activity that helps set up or implement the legislation. So again, there's going to be a resource linked within this slide that you can click on to learn a bit more about this process. But I just want to give you an idea of where we are currently with the national plan and what we're looking for in the future. So I want to talk a little bit about how the Michael J. Fox Foundation interacts or engages on behalf of the national plan. We do that through direct lobbying with myself and my colleague, Dustin Watson. We meet with advocates and staffers or the members of Congress themselves and directly talk about what's important about this bill and try to get their support. We also do grassroots and grass tops engagement. So grassroots is any person who is interested in taking action on this issue. Grass tops are people who have a personal connection or have the ability to just call up the member of Congress on their personal cell phone. Grass tops are fewer and further between, but who knows? You actually may have a connection with your member of Congress. Maybe your kids played together on a soccer team, or you went to high school together. These connections are really valuable and important. And so we lead this effort at both the grassroots and the grass tops level. Third is coalitions. Part of the reason I'm speaking with this group today is because PMD Alliance is actually connected with MJFF through a number of coalitions. The Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council is one that I help lead on behalf of the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and it comprises Parkinson's nonprofits from across the country. We also engage with the Movement Disorder and Policy Coalition, which is actually why Andrea reached out to have me do this presentation, because we were on that call and I was explaining the national plan. And she said, you know what, Mason, it'd be great if you could speak with our group. So we do this through coalition work, and we also do it through public relations, and that's through news media, getting the word out and sharing information about the bill, as well as what's exciting and happening in the Parkinson's space. And so through all of these avenues, we are engaging and interacting with a focus on the national plan to end Parkinson's Act. So before we get into the demo, I want to briefly acknowledge that we do have an action center currently. The Michael J. Fox Foundation has a one-stop shop, if you will, to advocate on behalf of the national plan to end Parkinson's Act. And we're going to walk through that in just a second. But this is sort of a screen capture of what that looks like. So we also have a national plan one-pager on the bill that you can use and reference in your meetings and when you're talking to staff about this bill. I'm going to walk through each portion of this one-pager because it's a lot. You can't really see it right now on the screen, all the words are kind of tiny. And so we're going to walk through each section in just a second. But I want you to know that this actually lives on the Action Center. And so at any point, if you wanted to gather this information, you are able to do that by going online and downloading it. So the beginning of the national plan one-pager explains exactly what the bill is about, and it hits all the high points. It gets you the bill numbers, so HR 2365 and S1064, and it notes that it's a bipartisan bill. There's nothing about Parkinson's that is a partisan issue. We believe that both members of Congress on the left and right can come together to support this legislation, and you can see that through the co-sponsors on this bill. The National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, as it exists right now, is no-cost legislation. That means there is not an appropriations attached to this bill. As it stands currently, the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act is simply the authorizing language to set up this advisory council that we've been talking about. And it explains the purpose of it is to unite the federal government in a mission to prevent and cure Parkinson's disease. This gets a little bit more into what the policy objective of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, and it talks a little bit more about the advisory council, who is comprising this advisory council and how they will operate. So it talks about how they will host meetings throughout the year and provide a report. That report is what we refer to as the National Plan to End Parkinson's, to the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, as well as Congress, that contains evaluations of the federally funded programs related to Parkinson's disease. That report focuses on priority actions to prevent and cure Parkinson's, priority actions to improve health outcomes, to reduce the federal impact of the disease on patients and the federal government, and to limit exposures to environmental triggers and to prevent Parkinson's. The goal is to actually ensure that there is efficient and effective coordination among federal entities with the responsibility for managing, treating, and curing Parkinson's disease. This is also on the National Plan one-pager, and it's some quick stats about Parkinson's disease and why this bill is so important. We know that Parkinson's is the second most common and fastest growing neurological disease. There's over 1 million people in the United States with Parkinson's, and over 110,000 are veterans. We know that 90,000 new diagnoses are made each year, and that's about one person every 6 minutes. We have an idea of the approximate cost of Parkinson's disease to the US federal government, as well as patients and their families. And then we know that that cost is actually going to be increasing substantially over the next 15 years or so. So these are information that's, again, on that one-pager, and that you can share with staffers in your meetings and use as talking points whenever you are calling your members of Congress. Finally, we include the call to action. It's sort of at the top of the one page and at the bottom as well. Please co-sponsor this bill today. And there's the clear way for staffers to do that, and it's by reaching out to these lead offices and staff contacts. We include the lead offices, Gus Bilirakis and Paul Tonko in the House, and Senators Capito and Murphy in the Senate, and ways to reach the staffers who are helping lead this effort. And then at the very bottom, you can actually see that there's a staff contact for the Michael J. Fox Foundation as well, if they would like more information. So this is sort of the end of our one pager. And if you have questions of this, again, jot them down and we'll cover them at the end of the presentation. Also in the Action Center are frequently asked questions. And again, I'm going to navigate to some of these pages in just a second. And ways to get involved. So from our Action Center, you're able to call your members of Congress, you're able to write your members of Congress, and share with your friends and family. We may be adding more tools throughout the year, but I wanted to let you know that some of these ways are currently on the Action Center. In terms of timeline, Congress operates on a 2-year schedule. So every 2 years, bills are introduced or reintroduced, and they have 2 years before they basically expire. So this Congress actually goes until January 3rd of 2025. That's when it ends. That's our drop dead date to get the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act passed for this Congress, the 118th. This is a call script, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second so I can do a brief demo of the National Plan Action Center for you all. So give me 1 second to navigate there. Beautiful. Can y'all see this screen with the National Plan Action Center? Yes? Okay, beautiful. So this is the landing page. So if you go on the National Plan and click home page, this is the page that will show up for you. And you can see it includes a brief blurb about what the National Plan is and that it's been reintroduced, and then links for you to click to call or write or share with your friends and family. And then on the side here, you can see there's a way for you to share your story about Parkinson's disease. So if you are comfortable with sharing your story with us for our records, you can attach it. And we can use your story whenever we're talking with members of Congress and their staff or leading policy efforts on behalf of the National Plan. It's entirely voluntary. You do not necessarily have to submit this form if you do not want to. And then at the bottom here, you can see that we include links to the one pager, some frequently asked questions, and how to effectively tell your story. We're going to go through each of the web pages really quickly, but you can navigate to them and check them out on your own. So underneath the homepage is the opportunity for you to call your members of Congress. We include different options for you to do this on the left-hand side. So option 1 is just completing this form, and it will require you to actually input your phone number, and then it will have you call your members of Congress directly, and it'll pop up with a script that you can use. And I've actually included that very same script on a slide within the presentation. So if you wanted to use option 2, and look up your members of Congress's office directly, you're able to do that. You don't have to use the entire form if you don't want to, and you can just have that script in front of you using the slide deck. And then option 3, if you're not comfortable looking up your members of Congress's phone number, you can actually simply call this one number. It's called the Capitol Hill switchboard, and then ask to be connected with your members of Congress office, and they will connect you directly. So there's 3 different ways of getting around to the same action. Again, if you want information on how to effectively tell your story, we have a resource on that. And one thing I want to quickly note is that as you type your street address, we're gonna do this in a second, but as you type your street address, make sure to click the Powered by Google option that pops up. Otherwise, sometimes advocates get a message saying they're ineligible. Specifically for the Call Your Members of Congress campaign, we are only calling it members of Congress who still need to sign on as co-sponsors of the legislation. You'll see that's slightly different for the Write Your Members of Congress campaign, which we're actually going to participate in just a second. So as I navigate to that page, you can see option 1, again, is completing the form on the right, which I'll do in just a moment. And then option 2, you can actually handwrite a letter and mail them to your members of Congress. Because security protocols for sending letters and stuff like that changes all the time, we encourage you to look up where the most appropriate office location is using the resources linked here. And you'll see that this one does not have a disclaimer that you will only be messaging members of Congress that currently need to become co-sponsors. This is actually going to go to all of your members of Congress. And that's because with this message, it's been bifurcated, or we have 2 different messages that are being sent. One, to thank members of Congress who are currently co-sponsors of the bill, because we believe that's an important part of advocacy, making sure they know that you are grateful that they have co-sponsored. And then 2, for members of Congress who haven't co-sponsored just yet, there's a call to action for them to do that. So I'm going to quickly fill out this form just to show you how easy it is. We'll go Mr. Mason Zeagler, and I have done this campaign so many times. So I'm going to use our policy email. So policy@michaeljfox.org. My address, I'm going to do 111 West 3rd Street, and this is our New York address. Let me see. I think it's this one. And my connection to PD, I'm a researcher or clinician who works with the PD community, but some of these other categories may apply to you, or you can just click other and simply use that option. No military experience, and this is actually to confirm whether you would like to receive communications from the Michael J. Fox Foundation going forward, some of which actually include updates on the national plan. For the sake of this demo, I'm just going to click no in case that's something you'd like to do. You can still participate. I just want to show you that. So when you do that, you can click preview. And so because I chose the New York address, you can see that it's been selected for each of the New York members of Congress. And here you can actually select who you want to send it to. So I want to send it to Senator Gillibrand, Schumer, and then also my representative, Bowman. And you can actually see the messages that you're going to be sending to your members of Congress on the right-hand side of the screen. If you want to, you're more than welcome to review the language that's within this request. Senator Gillibrand's actually already a co-sponsor, so you can see the thank you message that she would receive. Senator Schumer has not yet taken a stance on the bill. He is not currently a co-sponsor. And so you can read the message that you'll be sending to people or members of Congress who are currently not co-sponsors of the bill. It explains you're reaching out as a member of the Parkinson's community, a little bit more about what the bill actually does, a little bit more about Parkinson's disease, and then exactly how to co-sponsor. This is actually a great opportunity for you to go in and type a little bit about your personal story. You can see it's entirely editable. If there's certain parts of this message that you want to remove, you're able to do that. We don't recommend it. But I just wanted to acknowledge that you are able to input a little snippet about your personal story, and you're actually really encouraged to do this. Again, personal stories go a long way with helping members of Congress understand why this bill is so important. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top. All you have to do is click submit letters, and then you'll get a thank you message saying thank you for writing your members of Congress and support the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. And then if you want to share this campaign on social media, you're able to do that as well. I won't do that at the moment, but that's just an example of how easy and quick it is to write your members of Congress. Is very similar for the Call Your Members of Congress campaign, as well as sharing with friends and family. Again, this just looks like a brief social media message that you can share on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And we actually have the message copied and pasted right here. So if you need to insert it, you're able to do that really quickly. Just Control C, Control B, and send it off. And then just click All Finish when you're done. So those are the 3 different campaigns that we have set up. So call, write, and share with friends and family. This is where you can find the national plan 1-pager. So what we just walked through together. Again, it has each of the parts that we talked about. And you can download this file, I believe, and keep it on your computer if you'd like to. Frequently asked questions. This is actually a live website, a live document that you can help us update. As you have questions about the bill, what's important about it, what things are confusing to you, please do share those with us. We use that to update this resource because honestly, the questions you're having are likely questions that other advocates are having as well. So it explains a little bit more about the national plan, how you can read the bill, why we need the national plan now. I also quickly wanted to note that this bill does include Parkinsonism conditions. So Lewy body dementia, multiple system atrophy, corticobasal degeneration, progressive supranuclear palsy. These are all included in the bill, and it explains how Parkinson's is actually defined. So you can see that was a question that had come up previously that we wanted to address for advocates. So that's why we updated included on this page. And then again, all the campaigns are at the bottom, the 1-pager, how to tell your story. So I'm going to navigate finally to how to effectively tell your story. And this is just a brief outline or an example of how you can effectively tell your story with a member of Congress or their staff. Hello, my name is, and I live in. Again, I won't go through each of this, but it's important that we do include a section for you to provide details about how Parkinson's has impacted your life specifically. Again, that's a really important part of advocacy, and it's something that we don't want missing at all, if at all possible, when you're advocating with your members of Congress. It really provides that personal touch that helps them understand why they should act on behalf of the bill. That's the action plan. That's the action center as it exists now. Again, we're going to have more resources, and this page is going to be updated continuously throughout the year as we have the bill move through Congress, and we'll provide brief updates here and on a blog that MJFF is going to be posting. So just wanted to make sure you all knew about the Action Center. So I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare my slides really quickly. And I'm going to be dropping links to all these resources in the chat in just a moment. So here we go. Can we see my slides? Yes, okay, beautiful. So this is the example of the call script that I just showed you. So whenever you were to click, call my members of Congress, this is the message that pops up. It's hello, my name is, and I'm calling from. It's important to let them know which city and state you're calling from so they know that you're a constituent. And I'm calling to ask the representative or senator to co-sponsor the bill. It explains a little bit more about the bill and hits the high points. It's bipartisan, it's no cost, and exactly what it does. And I'm asking for them to show their support for the Parkinson's community by co-sponsoring the bill. And then it actually asks them, I would appreciate a response whenever possible on whether the representative or senator has decided to co-sponsor the bill, and then thank them for their time. So this is just an example of what the call script actually looks like. I wanted to make sure that you all saw that. It's really quick. It's really simple. Calls with members of Congress in their office, if you're just calling them out of the blue, typically don't last longer than 5 minutes. And they don't have to. You're really just there to let them know your position on the bill and request their support. Oftentimes they'll thank you just for calling. And finally, I just wanted to leave you with ways you can take action today. No one wants a presentation to just be theoretical. We want to have something that you can actually partake in, participate. So you can email or write a letter to your member of Congress using the Action Center, copying and pasting what's on the Action Center and writing it down in the letter, however you see fit. You can also go ahead and call your members of Congress today. A third way is you can actually invite your members of Congress and their staff. And again, it's important that you consider their staff as also participants in these activities because they're the ones who help actually synthesize and read through the legislation and let their boss know what it's all about. But you can ask them to join your support group meetings or a boxing class or a community event, a way for them to engage with members of the community and empathize with your experiences and what your needs are. Or you can also look to find and attend a local town hall or other events to share information about the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. So these are the 4 actions that are really quick and actionable that you can partake in today. But I just wanted to leave you with some form of call to action at the end of the presentation. And now, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. And as you come off mute and stuff, I'm going to quickly drop a link into the Action Center, just so you can access all the resources that I just finished talking about. So I'm going to drink some water because my throat is dry at this point. But thank you all for hearing me out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mason. We are going to, I will send out tomorrow a link of this meeting so you can share it. One question people had, if your member of Congress has already co-signed as a co-sponsor, does it help to call other offices that are not in your personal district?
So we tend to require or request advocates not do that. Although it's important that these members of Congress do hear about it, it's really important that they hear it directly from their constituency, the people that they represent, the people that voted them into office. This is ideally how democracy works. And we know it can be really exciting and really impactful if you were to take that action. However, we want to do this in a way that lets members of Congress know that it's coming from the people that they represent specifically. I am one person. I am Mason Zeagler from Eastern North Carolina. And the issues that impact me as a constituent of Representative Murphy is very different than someone who's living in California. And they understand that, and that's what they're looking for. They want to hear from people who they actually represent. So while we love that energy and it's important to keep that sort of energy going and momentum, we do not ask advocates to do that for the sake of making sure that their members of Congress are actually hearing from their constituents. And I hope that makes sense.
But they should still reach out to their congressman or woman if they're still in support of the bill, just to kind of reiterate, like, hey, this is important to us. You know, I appreciate your.
It's always great to say thank you. Members of Congress love to get praised. So I think it's always really important, if your member of Congress is already on the bill, just let them know. If you have the time to do it, and it's honestly easier than actually making a request from them, and it helps you do that sort of relationship building. I think there's no problem with you reaching out to your members of Congress and just letting them know that you do appreciate their support for the bill. And the staffer who you call will actually breathe a sigh of relief, probably, because they're not getting yelled at. They're actually getting a thank you. So I definitely do encourage that.
Have any other questions? Because otherwise we are going to send you guys into your groups to maybe talk about. I'm putting it in the chat. How will you take action? What are you going to do to take this and kind of run with it so that we can, oh, Phil, you're on mute. You're on mute, Phil. You got to come off mute. Got to unmute yourself.
Gotcha. Getting there. Mason, I'll make this short and sweet. When are you running for office? And a great presentation. And did you say, are you actually 22?
I'm actually 26. And I would love to run for office one day, actually now. I think it's important, if you're going to run for office, to really understand the environment of where you're around, the people you're actually representing. And the people I feel closest to are people in my hometown, but I haven't lived there in several years. So in the future, whenever I eventually venture out of DC and settle down, that might be something I consider. But as it stands right now, I am not looking to run for office. That is a very, very busy job.
Great presentation, great verbal skills and everything. You don't say ever.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yay.
Can we use that PowerPoint of advocacy to share with other people in our community on how they can do it?
Yeah, you are welcome to do that. This presentation that I created is actually drafted for advocates as its audience. And that's something to keep in mind about the one pager too. When if an advocate were to receive the one pager, they may say, okay, this is a lot of information. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the audience for the one pager is actually congressional staff. And we try to include just the high points of what they need. So like with yourselves, I would try, if you're offering the one pager to an advocate, to try to walk them through what each section means, what it's about. But yes, with these slides, you're more than welcome to use them as you see fit, with sharing information about the bill. And I honestly, I really appreciate that, that you think they're good enough to be shared with other people.
Yes, I see, but it just says iPhone.
Karen Malkin.
Oh, hey,
Hi.
Karen.
Hi. Hi, you did a great job. Do you recommend petitions for people? Like, I sent it out to 2 support groups. A lot of people said, oh, I didn't, follow through. I didn't have time. I didn't this. So whether it's the why and getting a petition going or bringing it to a support group, do you think that would also be impactful?
I think that is a great idea, and it's something that we're starting to dip our toes into as well, as what's considered a letter campaign or petition drive, as you said. Especially if you have a connection to a lot of other people in the community, simply getting them to write down their personal story, gathering those together, and then sharing it with your member of Congress, whether it's via email or actually delivering it to them in person. And one thing I will note is that members of Congress have offices in DC for sure, but they actually have several other offices in district and in state. So if you go to their websites, you can see their office locations. You can call them up and say, hey, I have some important stories to share with you on behalf of this specific bill. Would it be okay if I came in person and handed them over to you? That is something that we are actually encouraging advocates to do ourselves. And we know it's powerful because it's not just someone telling someone a story. You can actually take it back and read it and understand and analyze how this person's story can be impacted by the legislation. It can be impacted by the member of Congress. So definitely do encourage that sort of action. And that's part of the reason why we are asking advocates to share their stories with ourselves, is to do that very same thing and say, look, we have 5 different advocates from this district or this state that have shared their story with us and willingness to share it with you all. So we want to highlight one of those in this meeting. We do that especially if we have meetings that advocates aren't able to show for whatever reason. Maybe they're experiencing an off episode that day, or maybe they just forgot and weren't able to show up. So they're not necessarily a perfect substitute, but they're great things to rely on in meetings when advocates are, for whatever reason, unable to join. So I definitely do encourage you to go about collecting some of those stories and sharing them with your member of Congress however you feel comfortable.
Second layer to this, I know in New York City, we're going to have a unity walk, which I'll be there on the 22nd of April.
I'll be there.
Oh, well, then I'll look for you.
Yeah.
I hopefully I'll fix my hair a little, or at least Clemmy told me I should fix my hair and put in contacts, but I will look. Do you think it would be appropriate to have like a petition there? Because there you're going to gather. I mean, I know my whole family is going to be there and friends. So that would seem to be a perfect place to have, I guess, stories that can be written or petitions to be signed. And I'm happy to be in charge of it.
Yeah, you are welcome to do that at the Unity Walk. I think that's a great way to think about these things. How can you strategize getting or collecting stories from the greatest number of people at one single event? Make the work easier for yourself. And so I would encourage that. Also, if it's easier for you, you're welcome to share the link to the Action Center with them, and then they can just drop their story online. So I whatever way you want to do it, I definitely encourage it. But I'm so excited that you're going to the Unity Walk, and definitely do say hi. I'll probably be at the Fox Foundation tent or whatever it is. So I would love to meet anyone else who happens to be there as well.
Question.
Yeah.
So trying to get people to advocate. Our support group meeting is tomorrow. Don't know if any of them will help out, but what do I say to them when they say, what does this bill do for me personally now?
That is a great question. And that is a big facet of what the national plan is all about. Oftentimes when we message about bills with the Parkinson's community, it can be a little different or difficult because the legislative process is a little unknown. Sometimes things move really quickly. Sometimes they are stagnant and they just fall apart. So it's really difficult to know how to message to someone, how does this impact my life, or how could it impact me feasibly, because it's hard to predict. One thing I will say is that a pillar of the national plan, part of what we believe is so important about this bill is that it focuses attention on how do we improve the lives of people currently living with Parkinson's disease. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And as we are funding research toward a cure, we're also looking at how can we improve the quality of lives of people who are currently living with the disease, whether that's how they access care that they need to diagnose and treat Parkinson's. How do we help them be able to afford the medications and therapies that they need to live healthily? So these are all components of what will be the national plan once it is created. So I would say, in short, it's one of the three main things about the bill is how can we help people now, people currently living with the disease. They are also not just the advocates that are going to help get this bill passed one day and signed into law. They're also going to be the people who this bill is seeking to serve. It's not just people down the line impacted by Parkinson's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when I talked to my representative, I brought a list of the bill of who was going to be on the advocacy board. And it's important because it includes Parkinson's patient advocates, family caregivers. One of those is a young onset person. And so it really brings us into the conversation and they get the true patient word of mouth about what's going on. So whenever I talk to the representative, I said, that's more important than just about anything else, is that we have a voice on this council.
That is a big focus of the national plan for sure. It's not just members of the federal government that we're trying to, have sit at the table. We need people from the community, people who understand this disease and what it means in patients' lives to be there to inform how this plan is actually created. So it is people living with Parkinson's disease. It is their caregivers. It's their healthcare providers. It's also organizations like the Fox Foundation and others that are currently have experience in this research landscape. Something that I tell offices all the time is that the NIH budget for Parkinson's research right now is about 257 million. And that's the number you can find online. It's just under 260 million. The Michael J. Fox Foundation ourselves just this year in new grants and research that we're funding is going to be at 350 million. And we are not the federal government. We're not using just taxpayer dollars. This is for people in our community who are helping fund this research. So it's important to know the size of how this work is currently being done. And what we're trying to do here is really create a partnership between all the different parties that are working on Parkinson's research and Parkinson's care as well for people currently living with Parkinson's disease, so that we can actually have a feasible way and feasible metrics for ending this disease. It's no longer just in the ether like, oh, we'll get it done one day. It's no, we have to have a plan with accountability to actually get this done.
Yes, Phil, I love your little question mark.
I'm old school. Mason, when a celebrity or a well-known name person comes out that they have Parkinson's, is there a office or is there something at Michael J. Fox that he tries to use that name recognition? And do you fight over celebrities? Like, I don't know, is Davis Finney a competitor of yours?
No. So Davis Finney is by no means a competitor, nor is Brian Grant, nor is any of the other people who are living with Parkinson's disease. And this is the part of the presentation where I stress we're focused on grassroots and grass tops efforts with this disease. We know that some of these people know these people in power. We actually had in MJFF's leadership, our CEO, as well as Michael himself, engage on behalf of this issue just last year when the bill was introduced. But we are not competing with any of these organizations or celebrities for their engagement on behalf of this bill. As I said, we work through coalitions, including the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council, which includes groups like PMD Alliance, Davis Finney Foundation, the Brian Grant Foundation, APDA, the Parkinson's Foundation, these large national groups, as well as small local groups. So the Parkinson Association of Alabama, the Parkinson Association of the Carolinas, the Houston Area Parkinson's Association, Houston Area Parkinson's Society. We work with each of those groups as well to share updates about the national plan, share resources for how they can message about it, and then tell them about how we're going to move this forward. So I wouldn't say we're competing in the slightest. And I think that's the beauty of the public policy arena. Parkinson's foundations and groups are often fragmented based on like what they provide, who is a member of what. But in the policy space, because these issues involve literally every other person living with Parkinson's disease, everyone has a vested interest in working together to get this bill passed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hi, Mason. Do you know what's going on with a bill introduced by Representatives Bilirakis and Tonko?
Are you talking about the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act?
Yeah.
Yeah. What question do you have specifically about what's going
What
on?
is it? What has it passed? Is it going forward?
It was actually just reintroduced last week. And so we're really excited to help move the bill forward. Up next is working through the committee process of the bill. So each bill is referred to one committee within Congress. Sometimes they're referred to multiple, but for our bill, the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act is referred to the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And all this is in the slideshow. So if you need that information, you'll receive it afterwards. But we're going to be working on moving the bill through the committee and then eventually getting a floor vote on the bill. And then reconciling any differences before it's eventually passed by both chambers and then sent to the president to be signed. So we're at the beginning stages of the bill being introduced, and we're going to be keeping moving it forward through the remainder of this Congress.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Karen, I'm going to get your question in a second. Somebody did ask, there are a lot of moving days put on by the Parkinson's Foundation. Will there be somebody from the Fox Foundation to talk about the bill at these events?
So there may not be a person from the Michael J. Fox Foundation specifically talking at the moving day events. Like you said, there are many, many different moving days. What we're hoping to do, and what I'm actually been working on just this morning, is creating a resource or a flyer that provides a way for people at these moving days to participate, to take action. Included in that flyer is an example of that call script, actually one of the ones that I shared during my presentation, that advocates can pick up on a flyer and use that day. As they're participating in the walk event, they can pick up their phone, call the Capitol Hill switchboard, ask to be connected with their member of Congress, and then just run through the call script. And that action is meaningful. Again, calls, especially when they come to members of Congress's offices on a specific issue, are tallied, and then those tallies are shared with the member of Congress about, there was 20 different people who called our office today about this bill specifically. It's important to our constituents. So we will be working with the Parkinson's Foundations on getting those resources out to the community. It's going to take some time. This is sort of a new and emerging effort within the Parkinson's community. So if it's not at your walk day, do not worry. You're welcome to share resources like the one pager, like the national plan URL that I shared today with members at these events too, to get them involved.
Question? You say your question, then Bernard is next. Come on, Karen, you can speak, your turn.
What media attention are you trying to get to talk about the bill? Because no mention has been for the bill in the newspapers and media recently. I mean, I just got the email from the Michael J. Fox because I get the updates, but I literally just got it, but nothing on TV, nothing in the newspapers. So how do we shine light on it?
We are working on that, especially as this month is Parkinson's Awareness Month. We have a world-class Marcoms team that is leading that effort. I will say that the Senator Capito herself has put out a press release on the bill, and that's been picked up here and there. But as the Parkinson's Awareness Month continues and throughout the year, we're going to be working on this effort with a couple different ways. We're engaging with the media. We're going to be connecting the advancements in research to the national plan. We're going to be connecting fundraising at the Fox Foundation, specifically with the national plan as well. We're going to be sharing information about this at PDIQ events, like moving days and other events in the Parkinson's community. But I can't speak too much directly to what the media strategy looks like. I'm pretty squarely focused on policy, but that's something our Marcoms team is definitely taking a focus on, is how do we get this in the media so more people know about it, so more people take action on this issue.
Yeah, because it's interesting. My son works for, he's an assistant producer for Spotlight News in New Jersey, and he does NPR work. And he said, I didn't see anything. And so I sent him the update. So he'd be able to bring it to someone to say, hey, there was, it was reintroduced. But besides that, he didn't see anything.
That's understandable. We are working on getting the news out to everyone. Again, it's fairly new news. It was just last Thursday. So please do bear with us as we, ramp up the megaphone, if you will, and share this with more groups and get them to share it on our behalf.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Couple things. Thank you, Mason. Let me introduce myself. I'm an advocate too. So there's a couple things I want to highlight from what you said and encourage you on. The first is one of our callers mentioned petitions, and I want to highlight that, lift that up, because this is an important way to get people started. There's a bit of a challenge with the call scripts and things like that in getting people started. So, but the petition works really well for getting people's initial action, because it's a small action. It can be done at big events. We're going to be speaking before City Council for Parkinson's Awareness Month. We will bring this up. But the petition idea is really good because people can do something like right there and start an action. And so, it's kind of like the start with a baby step, crawl before you walk in, et cetera, et cetera. So what I find is the simpler the ask in the beginning, the simpler the call to action, the more people you get started, and some subset of that will go on to the bigger thing. So you might mention that to your Marcom team, that a petition is another piece of Marcom when done well, and it has a tremendous advantage. That's the first thing. The second one I want to mention is the importance of doing things at the local level as well. So, for example, some of my congressional representatives appear at a bunch of local events, and if we're making an announcement at those events, they get, and rallying the community, they get to see that their constituents are there, and it's a big issue. And some of them have a closer trip to the ear of a congressional leader. Some of my local leaders, if it's me, they might remember my name, but if it's my local rep, the commissioners, the county execs, things like that, and they mention it, they get a lot more hearing than we do. So and so the emphasis on doing some things local and appearing at local events where either congressional people there or some of your representatives who have good contacts with your congressional reps is a good way to get the ball rolling. And then the last thing I want to do is compliment you on representing the young people, because long-term, I think it's really important that we get many of the younger members engaged. They're more likely to be active. Part of raising awareness is letting them know that it may not be them today, but it's somebody around them they care about. And they're very active once they get going, and very creative. So I think it's really important that we also engage the younger people in this and in the campaigns. And gee, they're a lot more social media savvy than I am. And when I say savvy, I mean, I'm sure I can post stuff, and I got my LinkedIn, I got a decent following. But when they get going, they put out whole campaigns. And so I want to applaud that, and the idea you represent the young and are really getting going over us old fogies who have 1,000 other things taking our time. So thank you.
Bernard, I think all of those points are so important. And I totally agree on slowly working people up from what they feel comfortable from to something that makes them feel a little uncomfortable, something that's new for them. So we tend to start by asking people to write their members of Congress just personally. Even before doing a petition drive, just getting your personal story across is really important. And so I think that's why it's sort of our first ask of people. Second is just, maybe if you're comfortable writing an email, you can call your member of Congress. And if you've called them and you've already spoken with them one time, maybe it's easy enough for you to then just have a meeting with them. So I definitely agree on slowly working up the chain of what's called like a ladder of engagement. If you
Right,
will.
letter of engagement.
Yeah. Also hitting the important point of in-district and in-state advocacy is so crucial. I cannot stress enough how important it is to do this work back home, back in the district. Hill days are really important for sure. It's great to have hundreds and hundreds of advocates just march on the Hill and have the one dedicated day to talking about a specific piece of legislation. COVID has changed some of that. Some of the protocols for how Capitol Hill offices actually engage with advocates is a little different. You have to be very strategic when you're planning these sort of Hill days and stuff like that. But we actually have a new mechanism for engaging with these offices, and that's virtual meetings throughout the year. It doesn't have to be just one day in the summer when everyone's sweating through a suit talking about the same bill. You can actually do it from the comfort of your home. You can do it just like this, and have that meeting be just as meaningful and important to that staff, or have them hear your request and send it up the chain of command. And then finally, yeah, we need people engaged at every age level, at every stage of this disease, engaging on behalf of the national plan. A grassroots effort is just that. It's grassroots. It takes everyone. So I definitely believe getting every sort of facet of the community involved. And that's part of the reason why I do presentations like this, because we know that you guys have those connections. You guys know this community. You guys can get them engaged. And so I, again, really appreciate and second everything you just said.
Any more questions, any more hand raises?
Can't hear you, Eden.
Yeah.
I said, I'm looking for any more questions or any more raised hands. I see Phil.
Well, actually, thank you. And I know we were trying to move this along, but I'm waiting for one of those great Roger questions. And Roger has been quiet, and I'm always he's always got something sharp and intelligent to add to the meeting. So Roger, where's one of those great questions from you?
And uplifting. Don't forget uplifting.
Uplifting also. I know, I put you on the spot.
I love to be there. First of all, thank you, appreciate. My rib is healing. My shingles are departing. I'm back in the fight. My comment was age span, and that is very young till the day you die. So it can affect almost our whole life. It's not something, and like all of you know, once we get it to date, there is no getting rid of it. So this is important because we deal with it every day of our life after we are diagnosed. It not only affects us, but everybody in our circle of influence, and even our children, grandchildren, and those not on the scene yet. Its age of influence is very large if you look at the large picture. I love my big family. Keep on keeping on. There's no time to rest. Adios.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Roger.
Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Kai.
Hi, Mason. I've got two quick questions. You may have already mentioned this before, but do we know how many legislators signed on in the last iteration of the bill? Like, were we close? Were we far? And secondarily, is there any value if our legislators have already signed on to the bill? I know our local legislators, they have their own bills to deal with locally, but is there any pressure coming from below that's helpful to kind of work its way up the chain?
So yes, I can explain some context for the national plan from last Congress. As I said, Congress works in these sort of 2-year cycles. And so from January beginning of 2023 to January 3rd of 2025 is when we have our opportunity to pass the bill this Congress. Last year, it was introduced in July, and then I believe the Senate bill was introduced in September. And so it was actually at the very end of the Congress. We had about 5 months to pass this bill in a momentous effort. There are a couple ways that Congress can pass bills. I talk specifically about the committee process because that's our expectation for how the bill will move through this year. They also have a process called hotlining, which is basically a Hail Mary pass and getting the bill sent up for everyone's approval really quickly, basically a unanimous consent. However, at the end of last year, there were a ton of competing priorities within Congress. If you're not familiar, it took them until basically the 11th hour to actually pass an appropriations bill to keep the federal government funded, which is never great. And it actually impedes other really important pieces of legislation from getting passed, including the national plan. So we worked with our lead offices last Congress to, one, gin up support for the bill, get as many co-sponsors as we can in that short period of time, but then also looked at what was possible or feasible from a hotlining perspective, from what the committees of jurisdiction are actually willing to do if they're willing to take a hearing on the bill and things like that. Because of the competing priorities and time restrictions at the end of last Congress, again, the bill being introduced sort of later in the Congress, we weren't able to get it passed before that Congress ended. So we had the bill reintroduced again just last Thursday, and we've got it reintroduced with a number of co-sponsors already. So last Congress, there was 73 total co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, and in the Senate, that number was actually 16. Right now in the Senate, we currently have 8, so half of what we had last year, and we're hoping to get the members who co-sponsored last year on as quickly as possible. Same thing with the members of the House of Representatives. I think currently right now we're sitting at 16 in the House, and we're hoping to amp that number up really soon, especially now that the bill has finally been reintroduced. Some offices were able to join as what's called original co-sponsors, meaning they have a real vested interest in getting this bill passed. They have their names on it from the very beginning. Some members of Congress are more hesitant and they're actually willing to co-sponsor as a secondary co-sponsor, not an original co-sponsor. And so we're hoping to get a number of those offices on the bill early this week and next. And we'll be working with advocates like yourself and others throughout the year to get their members of Congress specifically on the bill. And it takes, one, educating them about the requests, but 2, being persistent and patient. These offices, sometimes it takes some time to understand the legislation, understand what the request is, run that up the chain of command. And so we're doing that with 435 members of the House of Representatives and 100 senators. There's not an exact number of who needs to be on the bill for the bill to get passed, but having more support, more bipartisan support, so both Republicans and Democrats on the bill, really helps us build the argument for why this bill should be passed, builds the argument that this is not a partisan issue. Parkinson's, there's no partisan part in it. And then also it builds the case for committees to actually take up the bill and say that there's a vested interest in members on committee and off committee about this bill getting passed. And so it's something that they should prioritize. So I will say that while we were able to get quite a number of members of Congress to support the bill last Congress in the short amount of time that we have high expectations for far exceeding those numbers this year, especially since we have more time in terms of the congressional cycle. But also we already have all those supporters who are still in Congress, those members who were reelected, that we can lean on and say, look, we would like your support again for the bill. And I can share in sort of the follow-up the text and the links to the bill from last Congress, just so you have sort of awareness of like who was on the bill last Congress versus this Congress.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, BJ, yeah, I saw your message in the chat. I included the lead sponsor as well. The co-sponsors include everyone in addition to the lead sponsor. So 73 and 16 or 72 and 15, however you see it.
anybody has other questions, any suggestions, any thoughts they want to share.
I do want to
Yes.
say a big, oh, go ahead.
We both got to first base at the same time. Tie goes to the runner. This is outside the circle of what we're talking about, but I'm just, and maybe, you know, I'm not a veteran of these Zoom meetings. Lauren and Laura, you look like twins from somewhere, and then also from Mission Viejo, and you're practically wearing the same clothes. Okay, that's not a Parkinson's question. That was just a curiosity question. I don't have anything else. Mason, you were a name that you will not get forgotten, even though you were always at the end of the class because you had a Z.
Yeah, I know that's right. I just wanted to say really quickly, thank you to each of you for being on this call, for hearing me out. I have a personal connection to Parkinson's disease, and I'm not gonna like cry my eyes out real quick, but I think of Steve Potter when I work with advocates like yourselves. I see his energy, the kind of person that he is, the willingness to take time out of his day to help other people. That is special, and that's not something you see in everyone. I see that with a lot of the advocates that we engage in with these personal meetings with the members of Congress and their staff. That's a very special part of our community and something that we are trying to harness, something that we are trying to use to help move this bill forward, but also give people hope. And I just really appreciate every single one of you for being on this call and hearing me out, taking action, engaging with the people that you engage with in the community. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Bill, do you have a question, Bill Brawley? Oh, and then Ben. Bill, you're on mute. Bill, you're on mute. You got to come off mute first.
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. BJ?
Yeah, I just want to, Mason, we worked together on a Zoom call with, and I want to tell people how easy it was and how you prepped us and kept us, you know, how to tell our story and gave us a rundown. You made it very easy for us to do. So I want you to tell people how to sign up for the action alerts for the public policies, and that way they can send the templates whenever something new comes up. And then how do they get on a list for the next time they want to call a certain representative?
Any person who takes action through our action center, and again, I will drop the link one more time really quickly for everyone, just because, you know, we have so many people chatting. But anyone who takes action on any of the campaigns that we have listed up there, specific to the national plan, you put your name in the hat for us to then reach out to you and say, look, we know that you care about this issue. You took action on its behalf. We may reach out whenever we're setting up meetings with your members of Congress specifically. And as BJ said, during those meetings, there's a quick prep call with what some of our consultants to just tell you like what the meeting's about, how to prepare your story and things like that. But then even before we actually meet with the staffer themselves, you join a call with me or my colleague for a brief few minutes before the meeting actually begins. And I'll give you a prep of how the meeting's going to run. It's a quick round of introductions. We're going to talk about your personal story with Parkinson's disease. We're going to open up for the staffer for them to talk about their role in the senator or representative's office and the issues that they focus on. And then we're going to open up the floor for questions about the national plan and Parkinson's disease broadly. What I try to tell advocates is that I myself, although I have a personal connection to Parkinson's disease, I'm a 26-year-old living in Washington, D.C. This is not something that I engage with every single day of my life. And so when it comes to telling or answering questions about what the experience with Parkinson's disease is like, I lean on advocates for those questions. And when it comes to specifics about the bill, the nitty gritty of where it is within Congress, the specifics of what's included, I want y'all to lean on us, the lobbyists who get paid to do that work day in and day out. I try to relieve the pressure of having to know every single thing about the bill from the advocates and really just have you be there to share your story and explain why this bill gives you hope and it could connect to how you are living. So I think that sort of speaks to what you're talking about with it's really no pressure on advocates to have all the information in their back pocket. You can definitely lean on members of the staff like myself and Dustin.
Yeah, don't be scared. They get you ready and it's an easy process. So if you've never done it before, go ahead and sign up. It actually, once you've done it, you're like, that was really cool. So go ahead and sign up.
Appreciate that advertisement, BJ.
Before I do forget, I always want to remind everybody to save their chat. Mason put a few links in the chat. So if your chat is open and you go down to the 3 little dots on the bottom, click on the more button and it will save your chat. So we encourage you to do that. Kelly also put the instructions in the chat. Thank you. Any last yes, Phil? I love that.
Okay, I know we're probably, again, running out of time, but as long as Mason brought it up or Ben brought it up, you and one other gentleman are the 2 lobbyists from Michael J. Fox living and lobbying in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just for a number's sake, how many lobbyists are there in D.C. Lobbying for Parkinson's, an end to the an end to the cure? No, you know what I mean.
Yeah, we're one of the only groups that actually funds lobbyists and a policy team in this way. That being said, there are thousands and thousands of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Many people have the same job that I do, but work on behalf of other organizations. And while we are important spokespeople on behalf of specific organizations, what's really important, what's really impactful is constituencies. And it's the people who those members of Congress represent. I think you hear this talk about how lobbying is sort of, a dirty behind the scenes game, how the sausage is made kind of scene all the time. But that's not how we approach this. We approach it through having it be advocate led, by having the grassroots people who are actually experiencing and living with this disease speak to it and its impact on their lives. And that's not something that every other organization does. That is something that is honestly a little too special in Washington, D.C. And so I think when we talk about a numbers game, it's not just about the number of lobbyists, it's about the number of advocates who are willing to take up the mantle and do this great work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Questions or thoughts? We still have a couple of minutes left. I do want you to think about how you're going to take action, how you're going to share this with your support groups, reaching out to congressmen and women, and just really kind of getting some support for this. Any final thoughts or questions? Well, as always, I will be sending out the copy of this. Kelly does her magic and then she sends it to me. So I don't want you to think I do it. I just send the email. Kelly does all the hard lifting. Trust me, the heavy lifting. Mason, thank you so much for your time. Mason has been incredible to work with. He basically got like, hey, we want to talk to you if that's okay. And he went, okay, that's cool. And so he was just really wonderful about that, because we were kind of like, hey, we have a meeting on Monday. Can we meet with you before then and maybe have you speak? Since it is Parkinson's Awareness Month, I was gonna, oh, let's talk about research and where, where you guys go to share with your groups. And then we got this kind of gift. That Mason was like, I'd love to talk, because I was like, I know this is a group who would want to hear what you have to say about the advocacy and about this policy. So thank you for sharing your time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all again. You guys taking this message and spreading it is so important. So I appreciate it. Definitely think about how you personally want to take action. Think about how you want to engage the people that you know in this type of information. Again, as much as I can, I want to share resources with you all. So if there's something specific that you need, you'll have my email. Definitely reach out if there's something I can do to help.
Well,
And enjoy your time in DC. It's where I grew up. It's a great.
I will. The weather is so nice today. I am excited to get outside at some point this afternoon.
And I hope you've seen the cherry blossoms.
Yes, I have. I was actually playing volleyball with some friends down at like the Lincoln Memorial Courts, and the cherry blossoms are in full bloom.
Ah,
With the cherry blossoms comes the tourists, though. I will give it that.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Roger and then Phil.
Okay. We all have a job to do, and I appreciate the whole staff. I also want to say I'm very interested in the original meeting content. I love what we have from Mason, but I'm very eager on what our previous subject was. And I'm only counting the minutes till you come to Indianapolis.
I love that. This is sort of my virtual tour. One day I'll have to do an in-person tour. Clemmy has already had that on the mind though, so we're gonna work something out.
I did mean PMDA along with Mason. PMDA is a get her done club.
I like that. Get her done club.
Yeah.
That could be a badge, Clemmy.
Mason, last question for me, and I've had more than my share, and I'm opening a can of worms here, but we have 125 people in our support group. They don't always show up that many, but we do a Zoom, and then 2 weeks later we do an in-person. Opening a can of worms here. Do you go to support groups as a guest speaker from time to time?
I can give presentations like this for individual support groups, yes.
Okay.
This was actually the first time I've given this presentation specifically this year, so it's a great practice run. But yes, if you would like me to deliver this presentation or something very similar to your support groups, that's something that we are definitely interested in. This is sort of the kickoff to the world tour that is me delivering this presentation. So I'll be talking with you guys today, and then the Houston Area Parkinson Society tomorrow, the Parkinson Social Network later this month. And so who knows, you may actually be on another call with me where you receive this exact same information. But definitely do hit us up. We're going to be working on thinking about how we approach these sort of events, knowing that, you know, I'm only one person and I have only a limited amount of time. So I want to say yes, and we will figure out how to get it done.
Okay. Thank you again.
What are you doing August 12th? You're coming to Baton Rouge. That's what you're doing.
I love Louisiana trip. My dad's from Louisiana, and so I make trips down there every Christmas.
Let me know. We'll have dinner.
We get some Quibidos.
That's good.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mason. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.